Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro is in China to discuss political and economic cooperation. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said that Wang Yi had invited Maduro through a letter by President Xi Jinping. The two will meet to hold a signing ceremony. Maduro will be in China until Sunday. So let's hear more on the visit from our correspondent in Beijing, Isaura Diaz.
Just moments ago, President Nicolás Maduro landed in China for a 3-day visit. There, he will be meeting with President Xi Jinping in the Great Palace of the People, the government's headquarters. President Maduro will pay his respect in front of the monument of the people's heroes located at the Tiananmen Square, which is China's political core. He will also visit the mausoleum of Mao Zedong, China's historic leader. Maduro will hold talks with the representatives from different Chinese institutions and companies. Venezuela's head of state was received by China's vice-chancellor. President Maduro arrives in China after the successful visit of Venezuela's Vice President Delcy Rodriguez to the country. She stated that China and Venezuela are two economies with similar development strategies which defend multilateralism and create new markets. Rodriguez also said that both countries look forward to increased bilateral cooperation. China and Venezuela are expected to sign agreements, especially after the creation of the Mixed Cooperation Commission between both countries. That's all we can tell you for now. We'll keep you posted.
That was Isaura Diaz from China. The United Nations Human Rights Council met for a special session on how to put an end to acts of genocide. Eduardo Marín has more from Geneva.
During the fourth day of the 39th session of the Human Rights Council of the UN, two topics were highlighted: the fight against genocide and the struggle for civil rights. In regards to genocide, the attendance commemorate the 70th anniversary of the Convention for Prevention and Sanction of these kinds of crimes. The countries stated that despite the creation of this convention 70 years ago, these crimes keep being committed. They mentioned the case of Rwanda in the 90s, also the case that took place in Bosnia, and also considered the Rohingyas crisis as a case of genocide. The Cuban representative also denounced the U.S. genocidal practices, happening for almost 60 years, in regards to the blockade applied by the North Americans against the island. One of the members, Fabian Salvioli, asked the Council if they are the right people, at the right time, and at the right place to fight against genocide in the world.
Eduardo Marín from Switzerland. Now to the West Bank in the occupied Palestinian territory, where a village has been demolished. Khan al-Ahmar is home to around 180 Palestinians. During a pre-dawn operation, Israeli troops removed temporary structures. Most of them were caravans belonging to activists campaigning against the demolition. The Israeli Supreme Court had lifted a temporary injunction blocking the demolition of what it considers illegal structures. Many families turned down an offer to relocate to Jericho. The United States' decision to close down the office of the Palestine Liberation Organization has met international criticism. Our correspondent in Cairo, Nayara Tardo, has more on the reaction of the Palestinian officials.
Various Palestinian leaders have ensured that punitive measures will follow the decision, such as the suspension of cooperation over security issues with the United States. Committee member of the aforementioned Palestinian organization, Hanan Ashrawi, will take Washington in front of the International Court of Justice in The Hague for recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. This recognition has violated laws and international resolutions on the issue. Ashrawi also called out Washington for halting donations to the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees in the Middle East. She claims this measure has deprived millions of Palestinians of their right to education, health, and work. UNRWA serves more than 5 million Palestine refugees in Libya, Syria, occupied Jordan, and in the Gaza Strip. Officials consider that these measures violate the right to return of Palestinian people.
Nayara Tardo from Egypt. After a dispute lasting years, the Spanish parliament has voted in favor of moving the remains of the dictator Francisco Franco. Since his death in 1975, Franco's body has lain in a mausoleum capped with a giant cross in the Valley of the Fallen, near Madrid. The right-wing People's Party and the Citizens' Party both oppose the move, but the parties of the left, as well as Basque and Catalan nationalists, all voted in favor.
The Valley de los Caídos must be a memorial dedicated to peace and reconciliation for the victims of the Civil War on both sides. It is a monument where everyone must be able to recognize themselves. This can't be a dictator's grave.
Thousands gathered in Omonoia Square to protest the Greek government's austerity laws. The measures are part of its debt crisis response. The All Workers Militant Front led the march. The union strongly criticizes the move to increase taxes. Protesters also lashed out at the EU and NATO.
Government's implementation of this unpopular policy is fully supported by the business groups in Greece, the European Union and the American NATO side.
Thousands of workers in West Africa's Benin are protesting against the government's move to limit the right to strike. In September, the parliament passed the bill to limit the amount of days that workers can strike to 10 days a year. Members of trade unions have strongly denounced the new law.
It is democracy. It is the safeguarding of freedoms. It is the safeguarding of our achievements as workers, as young people, as women, as craftsmen, as Democrats in general. Our claims cannot be thrown away, cannot be neglected by the government, and we will not be silent.
A state funeral has been held in Ghana for Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the United Nations. Dozens of African leaders and international officials were among the 6,000 mourners who attended the ceremony. The current UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, delivered a funeral address. Annan died in Switzerland on August 18, and he won the Nobel Prize in 2001. Coming up, more stories. We'll be back after this video.
Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Protests are taking place in Quito, Ecuador against President Lenín Moreno's economic policies. It's being organized by supporters of former President Rafael Correa. At least 3,000 protesters marched through the city demanding better working conditions. Demonstrators have also been angry about the latest Chevron ruling.
Fishing workers and political and social organizations and supporters of former President Rafael Correa are marching today against the latest policies of the government and the latest economic measures taken by President Lenín Moreno. They are defending their rights and their needs. They are against all these political and economic measures. They are against also with the latest ruling in favor of Chevron.
That was Denise Herrera from Ecuador. A protest has taken place in Lima against corruption in Peru. Our correspondent Jaime Herrera has more on this story.
A massive demonstration happened last night, which went straight to the front pages of the press. Newspapers showed the huge amount of people that attended. Their banners and messages have been trending on social media, with hashtags like Chavarri out, referring to the public prosecutor, Pedro Chavarri. Also, the slogan, "Everyone should leave," made reference to corrupt authorities who should be prosecuted, judged, and jailed if necessary. During the protests, also the chant, "Close the Congress," could be heard. People were expecting public authorities to react, but there has been nothing so far. Pedro Chavarri is still in his position despite the corruption case against him, and despite people calling for his resignation. Former Supreme Judge Cesar Inostroza has also immunity and is free without trial. Congress hasn't mentioned these cases or the corruption cases that involves other members of Congress. On the contrary, it has presented a new law to nominate judges. Demonstrations are set to continue.
Peruvians say enough is enough. Even though there is damning evidence against some of the country's highest-ranking judges, some still remain free. Others even continue to work, such as Attorney General Pedro Chavarri. There have been calls for him to step down.
He cannot be a judge and party of the very judicial process. He raises questions about the autonomy of the public ministry by establishing links with the APRA and with Fujimorismo. He has also lied several times.
According to demonstrators, the political system is also fraught with corruption. They are calling on President Vizcarra to shut down Congress.
Because we have seen that the Congress is a mafia. They protect sentenced people.
Too much protection for the corrupt. They are spending taxpayers' hard-earned money, especially all Fujimoristas.
What good are they doing? Laws? Most of them respond to Mr. K. So what laws are going to benefit the poor?
Social organizations, unions, students, and progressive political organizations join protesters in solidarity. They believe only a constituent assembly can put an end to corruption.
It can't be that here Odebrecht and Transnational rule and not the government.
Let's close the Congress and start afresh, a new country. They have sold everything to transnationals. It's a shame that we don't have stable jobs. There's no respect for the workers.
Today's demonstration was not limited to the capital. Protests chanted, "All corrupts go away," as they took their march to other provinces.
Now to Argentina. Tens of thousands of teachers and students walked out of classes on Thursday in Buenos Aires to protest against the government's education policies. They are demanding more funding for public education amid a crippling austerity plan. Teachers are also asking for an increase in pay to offset rising inflation. President Mauricio Macri has offered to boost pay by 15%, but teachers have rejected the move.
We are talking about teachers receiving the same wage as in December 2017. But today, the inflation has reached practically to 50%. Our salary hasn't changed at all.
And a teacher in Argentina was kidnapped and tortured because she organized soup kitchens in the city of Moreno in the province of Buenos Aires. Corina de Boris had been receiving death threats since last week for her social work. On Wednesday afternoon, she was kidnapped by unknown people. A bag was placed over her head and the words "No soup kitchens" were carved on her stomach. She had previously protested for better conditions in public schools. The teachers' union has strongly condemned this attack.
At 5 p.m., as she was walking out of school, a car with 3 people inside kidnapped her colleague, Corina de Boris. 2 men attacked her on the sidewalk, hitting her various times and forcing her inside the car. They put a bag over her head and exposed her stomach. Using a sharp instrument, they carved the words "No soup kitchens" on her flesh. But even more serious than this, after torturing her, they warned her that the next time she worked in a soup kitchen, it would be at the local cemetery.
In Brazil, Fernando Haddad, who is standing in for former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva as presidential candidate for the Workers' Party, is already a favorite in the polls. This according to a survey carried out in which 2,000 people were polled. The new survey, released by the Institute Vox Populi, found that the former mayor of Sao Paulo has at least 22% of voting intentions, while far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro sits at 18%, followed by Ciro Gomes of the Brazilian Labour Party with 10%. Unlike other research, Vox Populi's poll mentioned Haddad as Lula's candidate. Meanwhile, right-wing candidate Bolsonaro remains hospitalized as other candidates continue on the campaign trail. A statement from the Albert Einstein Hospital in Sao Paulo says Bolsonaro has been moved to intensive care after his latest emergency operation. In the meantime, Ciro Gomes of the Democratic Workers' Party met with students, and Geraldo Alckmin of the Social Democratic Party of Brazil met vendors in Rio de Janeiro. Costa Rica is into its 4th day of a national strike. Demonstrations continue on the streets as citizens demand a public consultation on the new economic measures. On Wednesday, police broke into the National University, arresting and beating protesting students. Let's hear from our correspondent, Fernando Francia, who has more from San Jose.
Protests erupted on Thursday, taking the national strike into its 4th day. Demonstrators are upset over what they say was excessive force used by police during Wednesday night's protest. Student organizations showed up outside the presidential house hoping to hold talks with the president. They want to know who is responsible for ordering those police attacks on student demonstrators. Many have been wounded, including members of the media, while some demonstrators are detained. This morning, demonstrators poured onto the streets once again to demand answers and an end to violence.
We'll take one short break, but stay with us.
The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? We analyze every move on Critical Move. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Thanks for joining us again. On October 1st, the International Court of Justice will rule on the Bolivia-Chile border dispute. Bolivia brought the case to the ICJ in 2013 in an attempt to gain sovereign access to the waters it lost after the 1879 Chilean invasion. President Evo Morales said he looks forward to a resolution. He believes it will be a new start for both Bolivia and Chile.
October 1st will be the start of a new history for Bolivia and Chile. We will forge new diplomatic relations. Accords will be fulfilled and we will begin to solve our pending issues. We are neighbors with Chile. We are brothers, and those bonds last forever.
The government of Antigua and Barbuda has said that its exclusion from the visa renewal waiver with the United States is based on its support for Venezuela. The cabinet held a discussion on Wednesday on the decision by the U.S. government to exclude citizens from Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, and St. Vincent, 3 of 6 countries from the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, from this announced waiver. It eliminates the need for citizens to pay in-person visits to the Barbados Embassy in order to renew tourist visas. The state of emergency in Dominica, which was called as Hurricane Isaac approached the region, will be lifted at 9 p.m. tonight instead of noon tomorrow. Public officers should return to work tomorrow as normal. Teachers and supporting school staff are expected to return to work as normal, but students get to stay home.
Thank all the residents and citizens and the thousands of people out in Dominica who interceded on our behalf for this storm. The fact is, for several days, this storm was coming straight to Dominica. It wasn't moving down, it was moving up, and one can only thank the Lord for sparing us.
Florence is expected to bring a life-threatening storm surge to portions of North and South Carolina beginning Thursday evening. The U.S. National Hurricane Center says heavy rain and flooding are already spreading. Winds are topping 105 miles per hour. Florence is expected to hover over the Carolinas, dumping relentless rain at least through Saturday. Mexico's outgoing government has come under fire for its human rights record. Hundreds of social organizations are urging the incoming government to consider a list of recommendations on this matter.
For almost 5 years after her father's murder, Soledad Hernandez is waiting for authorities to clarify the case which involves an ex-mayor. The politician, José Luis Abarca, is the former mayor of Iguala Guerrero. He is also linked to the disappearance of 43 students in 2014.
My father disappeared in the middle of a protest. He was with several organizations in Iguala demanding social change. They had already been suppressed by some local policemen on several occasions.
Arturo Hernandez Cardona was a human rights defender in one of the most violent states in the country. Dealing with the judiciary system here is difficult for the victim's family.
The psychological trauma has been very serious. Some of the relatives have had to leave the country, others have left the state, and it is hard to visit family afterwards.
Access to justice is one of the most abused rights in Mexico. That's according to non-governmental groups that presented a report on the issue to the UN.
The government's philosophy has been about trying to protect its public and international image instead of protecting its people from grave human rights violations.
According to the joint report from 245 organizations, Enrique Peña Nieto's government left a lot undone.
Among defending people and journalists, we've gathered a total of 58 recommendations from both sides. They include generating a protection mechanism, establishing a fair legal environment for human rights, also freedom of speech and strengthening the system of investigating attacks on both populations.
She also questions the treatment that undocumented migrants are receiving from the authorities. Most of them come from Central America and have become victims of disappearances, extortion, and murder.
The focus has been on national security throughout the South Border Program. This means a policy of detention and deportation. Between 2012 and 2017, more than 500,000 people have been deported by the Mexican government.
They are asking President-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador to include their recommendations in his government's policies. They also want more to be done to tackle gender violence and to defend communities that oppose infrastructural projects.
And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But this and many other stories you can find on our website at telesurtv.net/English. Here you can find all our latest information from Latin America, from the region, videos, all our opinion articles, and everything. You can find it through countries or through topics as well. And be sure to check us out also on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.